Hello and welcome to Greatest Games Never Played, a Lantern Light Studios production. I'm Alex Fitzsimmons and joined as always by my co-host Reno Del Maro. Reno, how you doing today?
Hi,
I wasn't expecting that. All right.
I got
Um,
nothing.
you got nothing.
I got nothing. I know. I couldn't rack my brain this week for some stupid tricks and antics that I'd pull. So I just,
I got to be
yeah,
honest. I allot like a decent amount of time there where I can just kind of space out while you do an impression here.
yeah, I know. Make
So I
it
don't have
maybe
anything
gets.
now. You kind of thrown it back at me. Um, all right.
See, I
So
always keep you
what,
on your toes, son. I always keep you on your toes.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. Um, so what we do here at Greatest Games Never Played is we take a look at a pivotal moment in sports history, flip it on its head, and try and analyze what would have happened if it had gone differently. So without any further ado, let's send it over to the magical man himself, Taro Sujimoto.
April 21st, 2001. The Atlanta Falcons made it official. They selected superstar quarterback from Virginia Tech, Michael Vick, with the first pick in the NFL draft. Only one day prior, they swapped a king's ransom of draft picks to San Diego to secure the pick and tie the franchise's future to the young star from Newport News, Virginia. Michael Vick would spend 1 year backing up Chris Chandler before taking over the reins. Vick would electrify the fan base with his unreal speed and quickness. Vick became must-see TV as he began tearing through the record books. But just as quickly as he raced by his opponents, it would all be gone before he could begin the 2007 season. Mike Vick had been funding and running a dogfighting kennel in a flop house he purchased in Virginia. The grim stories of what took place in the residence and also at Michael Vick's hands would forever change the way the one-time hero of many would be perceived. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell suspended him, calling his actions cruel and reprehensible. After being indicted on federal charges, Mike Vick would be found guilty and would be sentenced to 23 months in prison. Michael Vick would return 2 years later, getting a second chance in the NFL with the Philadelphia Eagles. After looking shaky the first year, he showed improvements in his passing game and was able to continue on as a starter or backup in the NFL until he was 35. Mike Vick's legacy and reputation is forever tarnished by his crimes, and his on-field achievements are diminished as he lost the prime years of his career behind bars. But what if Michael Vick had showed better judgment and compassion in his personal life? What if he had the maturity then to never become involved with something so heinous? What if Michael Vick had not ruined his career with his involvement in dogfighting?
Okay, we're back. That's a interesting topic we've got there, Reno. I know it may hit a little home for you, some Philly ties there, but I also know you got a statement you want to read that we prepared here.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Thank you. Just want to say before we get started, I just want to convey a message to our listeners that we fully understand that the topic of Michael Vick's career and the situations surrounding his arrest and incarceration could be considered upsetting and volatile to many of you out there tuning in. Alex, myself, and Light Studios respect and understand your feelings as it pertains to Michael Vick, the charges that were brought against him, and his later conviction and incarceration as it pertains to the heinous acts of dogfighting and other crimes committed in a violent nature towards animals. We hope you understand that we here at GGNP in no way, shape, or form condone these violent and disgusting acts committed by Michael Vick prior to his inevitable incarceration. What we are looking to do with this episode is speak purely on the speculative hypothetical of what Michael Vick's career could have turned out to be had he not been charged and later found guilty and put in prison for the nature of the acts in which he committed. All at the studios are animal lovers, and many of us, such as Alex and our producer Anthony, are both dog parents. I have very close friends, Sam and Julia, who foster and coordinate events for Tri-State Basset Hound Rescue. And I have other family members who have dogs in their families. So we know the nature of this conversation may be hard for some listeners to kind of disassociate away from the true facts of what did in fact happen. But we ask you, please give us a chance. And to back up our promise, our producer Anthony let me and Alex know that for every 5-star rating we receive on Apple Podcast between now and August 10th, the studio will donate money to the ASPCA to support their efforts to help animals all over the world. So help us out and increase the contribution we're able to give. And thank you guys.
That's pretty generous there of Anthony. I feel like I'm going to go ahead and just match it. Whatever Anthony pays, I'm matching.
I'll do the same.
All right. I knew I put you on the spot there.
No, I was prepared. I kind of figured you might say that.
All right. So, yeah, we both know the Mike Vick story pretty well, but I think before we get into the what could have happened had this gone a lot better, we should probably have a little conversation about what did happen. So, I don't know if you want to start us off here.
Yeah, let's start with like Mike Vick. Basically, he was drafted. He was the first pick in the 2001 draft by the Atlanta Falcons and then coach Dan Reeves.
So they traded up for that pick too.
Yes, actually, they traded the night before, I believe.
It was.
They were the 5th pick in the NFL draft originally, but they kind of stunned everybody by trading up to number 1 with the Chargers. And they gave up their 1st-round pick, which was the 5th pick that year, and a 3rd-round pick. And they also gave up a 2002 2nd-rounder in order to get Mike Vick out of Virginia Tech and make him the franchise QB.
And don't forget wide receiver Tim Dwight as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, they did grab Tim Dwight in that. Funny thing is, like, San Diego actually picked up 39-year-old veteran Doug Flutie that season in 2001 in the offseason. And as you know, they drafted Ryan Leaf 2nd overall in 98, but he basically went bust and was off the team before the 2001 season. But the trade worked out because the Chargers used their 5th pick for future Hall of Fame running back LaDainian Tomlinson. And Vick became a star in Atlanta.
So Atlanta traded their pick, though, didn't they? They traded their pick the following year, right? Because I'm sorry. I jumped ahead a little bit there. Continue on, Rito.
Well, basically, Atlanta finished 7-9, and they were, they finished 4th out of 5 teams in the NFC West. That's before people don't even remember this. I bet that's before Seattle moved into the NFC because they were formerly an AFC team, and then Houston was added to the NFL as the 32nd team. And in that case, in 2002, it ended up creating 4 divisions in each conference. But yeah, Mike Vick had a pretty, it wasn't a crazy collegiate career. I mean, he was a redshirt freshman.
As a freshman, he finished 3rd in Heisman voting, which is the highest, and he tied for the highest anyone's ever finished. As a freshman.
It was weird. He played very well, but again, he didn't have crazy throwing numbers. But in 99, he had 13 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. They went 11-0 that season, and they actually went to the Sugar Bowl and played for the national title.
Virginia Tech we're talking about here too.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So Mike Vick's from Newport News in Virginia. So for him, this was a chance to stay home, close to where he's from. That's kind of, he said that was the biggest influence in why he picked Virginia Tech.
Yeah, he wanted to be close to home. He wanted to be close to his family. I know later on he was quoted.
And his friends, which is a little bit of foreshadowing for how his whole career would go too.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, he went to the Sugar Bowl as that first year against Florida State. I'm sorry, the FSU was the team he played. Lost 46-29, but he did have a 21-point comeback before Florida State took over. So he played 2 seasons in college. He put up some numbers, but you could see the athleticism. I mean, this guy was on a whole nother level. So
he has the
NFL.
He's set the fastest 40-yard time for a quarterback. Only ever tied by RG3 later, and they're the 2 fastest quarterbacks to put up 40 times at a 4.33.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, the guy is every bit of Starship 7 that Gruden called him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Interesting enough, Starship 12, Randall Cunningham before him. You know what I mean? Gruden gave him that name too. I think so.
Yeah, and like you said about his athleticism, he's arguably the most athletic quarterback we've ever seen. Like he was that good, and I think that's something that we kind of have to just discuss because it gets glossed over in the story of Mike Vick. Sometimes, is people talk about, oh, he's very fast. He could run he could run well. He couldn't throw very well. I just don't think that's really true. I think he could throw the ball really well. In fact,
I agree with that.
he had a really unique throw too. That he didn't plant his feet like your Brett Favre's and Elway's who would just plant their feet and rip it with arm strength.
He didn't
Mike
throw from the ground. He threw from like he could flick the wrist and
flick
throw
of the
70
wrist.
yards
And
easy.
it was I don't know anyone else who's done that who throws so effortlessly as Mike Vick did. Like whether you want to question where he was throwing it, I'm on board. Like we can question his decision making for
The
forever.
accuracy issues.
But
Yeah.
the ball he threw and the strength he had on it was incredible. Like you definitely hear people say that he is an underrated pick for best arm ever.
Oh, absolutely. Undoubtedly. I mean, the guy had a silly stroke of throwing down the field. I mean, like probably one of the best spirals you've ever seen, tight as can be, and he could like get it down the field with ease. The problem became the accuracy. Like I think he's the prototype, Alex. He is literally the prototype. He's the guy that like on an athletic level, on he's far and away like unlike anyone anybody ever seen. I guess the closest thing prior to him would be Randall Cunningham or Warren Moon, and he had the talent.
Warren Moon wasn't a giant runner, but yeah, Warren Moon's arm was unreal.
He could scramble if need be, but he had a big arm. But
Yeah.
Randall would be like his predecessor in the fact that Randall had a huge arm and had great wheels. But again, another guy who didn't have great offensive coordinator,
Mhm.
nor did he have great accuracy downfield. Where
And that's gonna be part of the story for Mike Vick too. You wonder how, his the staff around him, how much that really helped him in the long run. But speaking of Warren Moon and Cunningham, another distinction that Mike Vick has there is he is the first black quarterback to be taken first overall. Warren Moon and Randall before him did not have that distinction.
yeah, Randall was a second round pick, and I forget where Warren Moon went. I apologize, but I mean, those were the days when like, the drafts were like 15 rounds or more. um, Essentially though, if you look at Michael Vick, let's just look at the career in general. I'll throw some general numbers at you. 13 seasons. And he played his first six with Atlanta from 2001 to 2006. And of course, we know he missed 2 seasons in 2007, 2008 due to 23-month incarceration for dogfighting.
Well,
Um,
let's not just gloss over that. Let's not gloss over the Atlanta years too, because there's some interesting stories there.
Oh
Like,
no, we're gonna get back into it. I'm just giving a general outlook. We'll get back into it. No,
all
I
right,
definitely have some
I
points to
won't
make.
stop you. I won't stop you.
Don't let me don't let no come back. We will get into that. You know what I mean? I'm just looking at general numbers here based on him, like to kind of shine his overall career. Then he was out for 2 seasons. He had a 3-year sentence and he did 23 months and got out with, I guess, good behavior. Comes back in 2009 and he is picked up as a free agent by the Philadelphia Eagles as Donovan McNabb's backup. Didn't play too much in 2009 except for some gadgets. He did score a touchdown, but he ends up becoming the starter in 2010 when incumbent starter Kevin Kolb goes down the first game with an injury, and it kind of never looked back from there. He played great. So he was with the Eagles from 2009 to 2013. He came through Chip Kelly's first year in 2013. Then he left the Eagles, went to the Jets as a backup for a season. And then he finished his career off as a backup in Pittsburgh to Roethlisberger. But some career numbers: he started 115 out of 143 games. He's got 61 wins, 51 losses, and a tie. He completed 1,807 passes for a career completion percentage of 56.2.
Which isn't
He
bad.
only threw for not bad. He only threw for 22,464 yards. Again, though, he
Only.
missed some seasons. Yeah, only. I mean, I think he's not too far off from Troy Aikman, probably. 133 touchdowns to 88 interceptions. He does hold the current record for rushing yards from a quarterback, 6,109 with 36 touchdowns. He played in 6 career playoff games. He's 2-4. He led 14 comeback wins, 15 game-winning drives. And that single season rushing record from a QB, he broke it in 2006 with 1,039 yards on the ground by a QB.
Mhm.
Insane. And that was in his last season. He broke that before he got incarcerated. The prior record was held by Randall Cunningham, who had 942 yards 16 years prior in 1990.
Mhm.
Uh, but Vick actually signed a super large rookie contract worth $62 million at the time, with guaranteed amount of 15.3 million within the first 3 years, and a signing bonus of 3 mil. That was crazy because later on, I think after the Sam Bradford draft, which was maybe 2006, 2007, they started doing that rookie wage scale thing. So you weren't going to see guys making that kind of money, like, you know what I mean? Those kind of dollars as a rookie. But in his first season starting, which was his second season with the Falcons, he made his first of 4 Pro Bowls. He made 3 of them with the Falcons and 1 with the Eagles in 2010. And he, in his second season, he actually led the Falcons to a shocking wild card road win over the Green Bay Packers and Brett Favre. They won 27-7 in the frozen tundra of Lambeau. Before
no one really won playoff games in Lambeau at that time either.
no one. And
ever.
and it was not, I mean, they were a severe underdog in that game. No one was expecting that. So yeah, they shocked the world. They go into Lambeau in the snow, nonetheless, and they beat Favre and the Packers. But then they come to Philly afterwards and lose a divisional game to the Eagles and McNabb 20-6. But
I do want to scale it back just a little bit here when we talk about
sure.
the head coaches that were in charge here. So when he was first drafted, he had Dan Reeves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dan Reeves was there for what, till 2003. So he got him for the first 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And then last year he was 2003. He went 1-7 with Mike Vick and was fired mid-season. Wade Phillips comes in. The next year they hired Jim Mora. Now Jim Mora. Look, this is where we talk about like Mike Vick's potential versus Mike Vick's reality. I don't think Jim Mora ever helped Mike Vick here. I think Jim Mora, you hear the stories about there being very little accountability for Mike Vick. In fact, the backup quarterback, DJ Shockley, even said that he said he was a rookie. He didn't feel right saying anything because he thought maybe this is the way the NFL runs, where the quarterback doesn't really have to study, doesn't have to work hard in practice, doesn't have to understand the playbook. He's like, I didn't know if this was normal or not because he's a rookie. I didn't want to speak up. There's some concern about the way that they may have got off on the wrong foot with Mike Vick here. He's a guy who's ultra talented, I mean, the knock on him all along was that he didn't really care about the playbook, and he gave him a coach who was willing to look the other way. Is what it seems like here.
Yeah, Morris set a bad precedent. I think he was coming back from college at the time as well, back into the NFL, and he basically let the inmates run the asylum. And the biggest, no pun intended, sorry about that, but he let Mike Vick do whatever he wanted. And you're right. I mean, you always heard the stories about like Mike Vick didn't know the playbook. The problems that he had on the field were squarely, on a mental scale between the ears in the playbook, knowing, the position of being a quarterback. And even Mike Vick later on said, in his career, when he returned and he came back and got, came under the Andy Reid's tutelage with the Eagles, that he never actually learned how to play quarterback. He basically was, a running back with an arm. And
I love some of the stories that during that time too. They talk about how Mike Vick wouldn't slide, and then the story was that he didn't know how to slide. And in Atlanta, they brought Atlanta Braves former player Terry Pendleton in to teach him how to slide, and he couldn't teach him how to slide. Mike Vick's excuse was, "I'm too fast to slide," which is an absurd argument. It just means he would slide further, but it just seemed like he had very little interest in changing anything. He wasn't even willing to slide.
He'd be like a damn slip and slide with grease on it going down Mount Kilimanjaro. You know what I mean? If he wanted to slide, you know what I mean? That's how fast he was.
For a guy who's as ultra talented, as ultra athletic as he is, you watch him try and slide. It is like watching America's Funniest Home Videos. You're like, what is this guy doing? He's just doing somersaults. He's falling on his face trying to slide. You're like, this can't be the best athlete in the world. This can't be.
Crazy enough, though, even with Mora and the lack of discipline and no accountability and just basically letting
Yeah.
all the players, especially Vic, run the show, somehow, he had probably his most successful year from an
Uh,
Atlanta Falcons standpoint
they
in
went 11-5
2004.
his first year there.
Yeah, he started 15 games that year. He goes 11-4 in his starts. He's got his highest completion percentage at 56.4 as a Falcon. 14 touchdowns, not a ton, 12 picks, a lot compared to the touchdowns. But he rushed for 902 yards and he got to his second Pro Bowl. He also, again, led them to a division title and a first round playoff bye. What happens in the playoffs when they get there? They blow out the former greatest show on turf, the St. Louis Rams, 47-17 in the divisional round, right? And then again, strangely enough, they meet their demise in Philly in the NFC Championship with another loss to Don McNabb and Andy Reid. 27-10, they get beat in Philly. Of course, in 2003, he probably would have had a fantastic year too, but he broke his leg in preseason against Baltimore, cut a majority of his season short. I think he only ended up playing in 4 games. So he's coming off a big injury the year before and puts up some highlight numbers and gets to an NFC championship. So what did they do? The Falcons broke the bank for him. I mean, 24-year-old Mike Vick, is basically made the highest paid player in the NFL at the time. He signs a record 10-year contract extension worth 130 mil. And Alex, I do want to apologize on we do record from home, of course, and we've taped ahead a couple episodes. So I mentioned something about Pat Mahomes maybe only making like 100
Oh yeah, no, I know.
75 million.
I heard it.
well, since then, right? And again, when we listened to the episode, I'm like, oh, I said 175 million. Well, Pat Mahomes ended up making 450 million, which is insane. And now he's the highest paid player of all time. But at the time in 2004, Mike Vick, 10 years, 130 mil.
Chump change
now, but a league record $37 million guaranteed, which funny enough surpasses Peyton Manning's guarantee money from the year prior. Manning got 34.5.
Now, I feel like we've kind of talked about some of Mike Vick's deficiencies, but Mike Vick was a star. Like this guy was, it's almost hard to even fathom a player today. Pat Mahomes is the closest thing to that level of star where it is must-watch TV, where it's just Sports Center is just Mike Vick highlights, the video games. I mean, he was a video game quarterback, is what people would say. Like, this isn't a real person. This guy,
they called him the joystick.
He's all 99s. Who is this guy?
They called him the human joystick. Yeah, he made Madden. Like, I don't know anyone who basically didn't pick Atlanta just to be him.
No, exactly.
In Madden, because that was probably the only reason you were picking Atlanta, was like you wanted the threat of Michael Vick.
Oh yeah, you just go back and just run. That's all you did.
He can absolutely break off a 60, 70-yard run like it's nothing and not get touched. I mean, he did things that not any really no quarterback before him did. And I mean, Randall did some special things, again, being a Philly homer. I'm sorry, but Vick did it to a whole different level. It's insane. Like, I go back and watch some of his old footage and you're like, God, even like older Vick out of, prison still was doing insane things, running the ball, and he had a huge arm. And at the time though, the critics kind of panned the signing because a lot of people weren't entirely impressed with him as a passing quarterback in the NFL.
That's true.
And essentially he would only receive 4 years of the contract extension before he was found guilty of the dogfighting criminal charges.
So what happens with Jim Moore? They go 8-8 the next year, and then they go 7-9 the following year, and Jim Moore is let go. And Rich McKay, the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons at the time, is looking for a quarterback whisperer. He needs someone who can reach Mike Vick. This is a guy they're paying all this money to. And he goes out and he looks in college, the college ranks, and he finds Bobby Petrino.
Ugh.
So Bobby Petrino comes in here just in time for the Falcons to trade their backup quarterback for a first-round pick and Mike Vick to go to jail. So this is it's a worst case scenario for any coach, But then you have Bobby Petrino, who, if you don't know much about this guy, yeah, he's known as a quarterback whisperer. He's one of the guys who brought up Jake Plummer in college, but he's also known as a disloyal rat.
Huge scumbag, considered a huge scumbag among college and NFL circles.
Yeah, so he's a,
Um,
he's a Louisville at the time, and he signs himself a 10-year deal there. 6 months later, he's bailing to come to Atlanta. And then he's in Atlanta, 13 games. This team is struggling. Like I said, they traded their backup quarterback away. No Mike Vick there, and they are a dumpster fire. What are they? They end up 4-12, but 13 games of the season, he leaves a note in the locker room and walks out.
he goes he goes 3-10 and basically rolls and takes a job with Arkansas.
Yeah. Which
And
he's
then
later fired for getting into a motorcycle accident with his mistress, who he's paying to be on the football team. So his behavior continues. It's almost funny to think that if Mike Vick had been there, what Petrino could have even done for this guy. It's almost a worst case scenario here to have Petrino there coaching this guy up.
yeah, they didn't make, Arthur Blank and the management there, the organization and all they just
Yeah.
did not make good choices at the time. They really didn't.
Yeah, after that year, their general manager was fired up to president, where he still is, Rich McKay. They hired Tom Dimitrov.
Dimitrov, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
who
Thomas Dimitrov, who's seemingly
yeah,
been doing a better job.
a much better job. Yeah, he
Yeah.
has at least managed to keep his job and not hire insane college coaches. So,
But
but we talked about Mike Vick going to jail there, and we do need to address what Mike Vick did there, because it's kind of a moment that has colored his whole career. It's his image, his legacy, everything about him is kind of shaped by his crime, and that's whether you want to say that's fair or not. I mean, that's call it what it is. This Mike Vick is forever tied to the crimes he committed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you know what? Even before you get into that, I mean, look at some of the issues prior to the dogfighting case. I mean, let's go through a couple of these real quick. So basically, April of 2005, a smoking gun report comes out about Michael Vick. Of course, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Ron Mexico, quote unquote, where it gave, this is one of those great memes. You know what I mean? Allegedly, Vick has sex with a young woman, gives her herpes, and and then he gets sued, right? So in the lawsuit, it alleges that he gave the young woman the pseudonym name Ron Mexico, um, to avoid headlines about having an STD. He did settle out of court with her, and this was all before the dogfighting scandal came out. But this was when his name was still worth something. So already he's given some young lady herpes, and he's telling her he's giving her a false name. So that was weird. And then the following year, in 2006, they go 7-9, big losing season for them. And they play the Saints in Atlanta. So they're at home and they get just crushed 31-13. Um, and the Georgia Dome's going wild. They're just booing and jeering. And it gets to Michael Vick. And as he's heading towards the locker room, he's going towards the tunnel. He exchanged some words with fans that are screaming at him, throws a couple F-bombs, and boom, what's he do? Puts both fingers up and says, "I just don't give a fuck about you." So he pops the fingers at the fans. That's not a good look. He was fined by the NFL. I think he was fined like 20,000. And then again, in 2007, before he gets charged and found guilty of dogfighting, he gets caught at the Miami International Airport with a water bottle, and marijuana is in a hidden compartment. And he wasn't arrested and he was allowed to board the flight. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't a very model citizen prior to a lot of these things. So decision making, you know what I mean? The influence he had in his life, any kind of leadership in his life, like obviously he lacked that.
And that's kind of the fallback here, is that he did come up in a rough place. He came up in Newport News, and he brought his friends with him, and he thought he was doing the right thing in this way, where he's like, oh yeah, take along the people who got you there, kind of thing. But those people who got him there were not good people. I mean, that's the fact. And I mean, Mike Vick clearly didn't separate himself from that with his behavior either. But he brought his friends along. He had a flop house where they would all hang out. and this was in Surrey County in Virginia. And there was like a party house where people would just come and go. People joked about just being able to live there. Like it was, oh, you don't have a job, just come live on Mike Vick's time. Up at the place, up at his flop house here. Which, should I say a flop house? It's a multi-million-dollar home. But Mike Vick is so at some point along the line here, they begin breeding and training and raising dogfight. And then he sets up a gambling operation as well in Newport News for his dogs. So when we talk about the dog fighting, the dog fighting indictments, it's more than that. He's bankrolling the animal cruelty program here, and he's setting up a illegal gambling ring as well.
It's a life destroyer.
Yeah, and he says to this day, he's like, I didn't perceive it as wrong. He said it was a normal part of the culture and the life he grew up around. It never felt like a wrong thing. Now he acknowledges today that what it was, and he's trying to be a good advocate for it. Whether you can forgive him or not, that is everyone's personal decision. And I think his crimes are pretty heinous. So I do understand the lack of forgiveness for this.
I agree 100%.
But so he that they were raising, and essentially that he was killing dogs personally at times, through pretty horrible methods, through drowning, electrocution, hanging. If they didn't feel the dog was going to be a suitable fighter, they were doing that with them. And ultimately, their place was searched for drugs, I believe, and they found all this signs of dog fighting, and they tracked it back, and they found the gambling ring. They found he was funding this thing. His friends all kind of turned on him and said, yeah, he's the bankroll. And history, Mike Vick came out and said, I did it. He came clean, said it was me, I did it. And he pled guilty. After, I might add, lying to Arthur Blank and Roger Goodell, the owner and the commissioner of the league, when he thought he could still get away with it. So they had no real positive feelings towards him when he pled guilty. They were like, this guy's been coming in here lying to us about what he did, and now he's coming clean. So that there was no love there to lose, I guess. So he was immediately suspended, and you're right, it was jailed for 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy. 23 months incarceration.
Right in the prime of his career.
Yeah.
Right in the prime of his career. And that's what I think makes a conversation like this, as tough as can be at times, interesting, just because here is arguably the greatest athlete that ever played in the NFL. His prime is ruined. Is ruined by his own actions.
Yeah, cut down by him, himself. He was his own worst enemy. Yeah, and you know what? He does time in jail, and he comes out of jail, and he essentially seems saying all the right things and trying to work towards being the right person. But
he's got a PR team working for him. He's got Tony Dungy, a real character guy.
Is his advocate? Yeah, Tony Dungy was helping him as an advocate, and he was coming back to very mixed reaction across the country.
I mean, I would say I wouldn't even call it mixed. I think it was almost mostly publicly, at least out in the open, was pretty negative. I know there was people that supported him, but I mean, the guy wasn't going anywhere without being screamed at, being protested. Literally everywhere he went.
Oh yeah. No, I mean mixed in the sense that at first it was he was being treated, as many would say he deserved for doing what he did. But then it's funny how sports works, because then when a guy comes back and he's on your team, all of a sudden a lot of people tend to forgive. You know what I mean? Some people
that's only half true. I think a lot of people changed their opinion on their own team. I think a lot of people, when people who weren't Philly fans were like, "Oh, thank God my team didn't sign him." And of course, he went on to then play for two other teams who who probably had their foots in their mouth from saying, "Thank God it wasn't my team." But it's I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We don't talk about it much, but I'm from the Philadelphia area. I live in the city. When Mike Vick signed, it forever changed my relationship with the local teams. It just kind of did. It was a realization. I mean, I guess you always know it, but it became hard to root for him for me. It became like I was like, I'm an Eagles fan. the same time, I don't like this guy. In fact, I actively rooted against him. I had a Kevin Cobb jersey. I'm the one. I'm the guy. I had a Kevin Cobb jersey. I didn't. I
Wow.
was not okay with Mike Vick being here, and
You had a number
uh,
4, huh?
I did. I bought the jersey. Him and his mom. That's it. Like we have
Wow.
Eagles number 4 jerseys. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, there was. I made no bones about it. I couldn't support this man. This is my team. So, but it tore my allegiance apart, and I can't sit here and say I view undying allegiance to your home team as the same way as I did before Mike Vick. I'll say that.
Well, I will admit to you, like, I'm glad that you admitted that and came out and said that. I will tell you this. Again, I what he did was just sick and horrifying. And I love animals. I've had animals growing up. I mean, it's hard to forgive somebody like that. Um, but at the same time, like listening to him, I guess I'm like the eternal optimist. I just want to believe that
Can
some
change.
people do want to change and do change and do want to change and want to get better. And
And
I
he's
just
done
thought,
he's done all the right things. I'll say that. He's done all the things that a guy in his situation who's trying to better himself can do. It's
and he's
still
done it continuously
yes,
throughout, even after
yes.
his career. Um,
He's
I
still a
guess my
representative he still works with the ASPCA. He still works with PETA. He's doing everything he can to say, hey, what I did was wrong. But it's still a very visceral reaction to the crime. It made it's the state, it's the law's job to forgive him and to say you've done your crime, you did your time. But the individual can still say, Not for me." Like
yeah. No, I
and
agree.
that's fine to do.
I'll put it to you this way. For me, that was the moment, and I mean, I was a little bit older at that time. That was the moment when I stopped thinking of sports in a completely childlike way, where it's
Yeah,
like your heroes and sports is the all encompassing, and you start looking at it as a business. And I wanted to believe that he was capable of changing, of bettering his life, of helping, people and, helping animals and doing other good things with his platform now. And I just wanted to hope that he became a better person out of this. And my thought process was, I'm also a lifelong Eagles fan. So it's like, man, I've lived, breathed, sweat, like dreamed Eagles my entire life. And
yeah,
like to turn my back on them over this was would be hard. It'd be one of the hardest decisions in my life. Funny enough, like to turn my back on my teams,
oh
the
yeah,
teams that I grew up loving. And so I tried to, what I did essentially is I took it for what it's worth. Michael Vick, the man in his personal life, was one person, and I separated him somehow. I disassociated with him with Michael Vick, the player on the Philadelphia Eagles. And I just kind of rolled with, you know what? God, it sounds bad, but I mean, I was like, he's on our team. Hopefully, he's doing the right things. Hopefully, he's getting the help that he needs. Hopefully, he's going to help others. And he's on the team. And if he could help win, then I'm not supporting him as a person. I'm supporting him as a player on the field, on with the insignia, with the symbol on his helmet and the jersey on his back. And
yeah.
that's kind of how I did it. And seemingly over the years, I've kind of felt like he's done some really, really great positive things. But again, I digress. And however you feel about him, you feel about him, and you have the right to feel that way. To all the listeners out there, you have the right to feel that way, and I would never try to change your mind. Um, so yeah, and again, sorry that the whole thing happened. But he came back. Philly signs him. And it was crazy because it was like in the last preseason game, I think of 2009 before the regular season started. And he's going to back up McNabb, and I guess he's going to go ahead of Cobb, and he's going to come in as like a
Yeah.
wildcat gadget player.
And apparently, McNabb had vouched for him too. He had came forward and actually suggested it.
Little did he know he's going to lose his job, get traded the next year. But his actually Vick's best career season statistically in the NFL came under Andy Reid's tutelage in
And I
2010.
think what you have here is a case of you finally have Mike Vick coming across a coach who's cares, who's a quarterback focused coach. Yeah. I mean, you saw what he did with McNabb. I mean, I love McNabb. I know people criticize him for his accuracy, but Andy Reid trusted his quarterbacks. He sometimes to a fault, because he had McNabb who did have accuracy issues, and he's like, "Hey, McNabb, do you want to throw the ball 55 times today?" Like I've always, that always
Yeah.
blew my mind. I'm like, oh, I like McNabb. He's a really good quarterback. Maybe keep it to like 30. Like we don't got to throw the ball 50, 60 times a game. But I think he was a guy who trusts his quarterbacks, coached them up, and I think with Mike Vick, it was finally time. Mike Vick had matured in prison, and he was finally willing to listen. And here's the guy who's willing to teach him something.
And give him
And,
discipline.
and Andy Reid is a guy who was no stranger to troubled lives. Like his kids, obviously had drug problems and were
Son died of a drug overdose.
son died of a drug overdose. Like for him, it was kind of personal too, and that was something he had mentioned at the time too. It was more than
It was reclamation for a human
yeah,
being.
it was more than just getting a quarterback. It was about, you're right, reclamation for a human being who, he because he saw his own sons in Mike Vick as a kids who had made mistakes, who had been busted for drugs, who had done time. Like,
Well, I'll
and
tell you what,
he saw
Al,
his kids in Mike Vick.
he definitely took Michael Vick under his wing. I mean, so Kevin Cobb starts the season, gets injured in the first game with a concussion against Green Bay. I believe it was Clay Matthews who smacked him from behind, put his head in the dirt, and Vic comes in and relieves him. They lose the game, but Vic goes on, 8-3 in 12 starts. In that season, he throws 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions.
And more importantly, I had to hang up my Kevin Cobb jersey and never got to wear it again.
Never burned it, because he goes to Arizona the following year, but in a trade.
But funny enough, I did meet him later. I wish I had my Eagles jersey at that time. I was in a Buffalo hotel and getting breakfast, and Kevin Cobb comes down. I got to shake his hand, meet him. I was like, oh, that's kind of. I feel like as the only guy who has a Kevin Cobb jersey, it's kind of a unique coincidence.
That's a story I got to hear another time. My goodness, it'd be Kevin Cobb. That's awesome. So Vic throws for over 3,000 yards for the first time in his career. He's got his highest completion percentage ever at 62.6. He also puts 676 yards on the ground by foot and 9 touchdowns. He wins AP Comeback Player of the Year. He gets a 4th Pro Bowl bid, and he goes to the wild card where he has a showdown with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and it's a loss. And the Packers go on to inevitably become Super Bowl champs that year. And then he played a couple more seasons. But I mean, when you're ready to get into the what if, you let me know.
I think it's time. So,
all right, why don't you kick it off, sir?
Oh, we're kicking it off to me this time. All right,
yeah,
all right.
Start it off.
So, all right. So what we got here? I got a situation. 2007 rolls around. Bobby Petrino has been hired to be Mike Vick's new head coach. Atlanta is going to go ahead and trade their first round pick, Matt Schaub, their backup quarterback, to move up and draft Jamal Anderson like he did in real life. And ultimately, I think what we have here is a situation of Bobby Petrino not being a good head coach. And we have an 8. I think we have an 8-8 season here is what I've got. I went through each game individually, trying to look and see what I thought would have happened based on the rosters they're playing against, based on Mike Vick being there instead of, no one being there. So they originally finished 4-12 without Mike Vick, and with Petrino. I think with Petrino, I think they end up going 8-8, missing the playoffs. I don't think anything really changes playoff scenario wise. I think his team sits on the outside as they watch the Giants go in there and upset the New England Patriots to win the Super Bowl in 2007. I think then you're looking at the draft the next year. And really what happens here is where it starts getting interesting. Because whether you believe Mike Vick would have had a big influence or not, what's indisputable is the butterfly effect that not having Mike Vick of having Mike Vick on the Atlanta Falcons begins to have. Because in this draft, Atlanta took Matt Ryan in the 2008 draft. And obviously they're not going to do that this time. So now you've got Matt Ryan probably falling down to the Kansas City Chiefs become the first team along that needs a quarterback. Now you have the Kansas City Chiefs with Matt Ryan, and we're rolling into another year with Petrino here. So I don't feel like this is a big difference maker. And also this year too, Atlanta was supposed to fire Petrino and hire Mike Smith. So that's not going to happen. We got Petrino hanging around. So what I do think happens is Thomas Dimitrov comes in as the GM. They move McKay upstairs, and I think Petrino's kind of on notice here. He's not Dimitrov's guy, so they're going into this next year, and I've got them finishing 8-8 again. In real life here with Matt Ryan at the helm, they go 11-5. But I think with Petrino and Mike Vick, who's again he needs some kind of guidance here. He is not the guy he is. I think they make the play. They missed the playoffs. I'm sorry, at 8-8. But due to the shifting playoff matchups, I think the Panthers will go on to lose the Super Bowl to Pittsburgh instead of Arizona. So I did a little playoff matchup based on the record changes and who makes the playoffs based on that. And I've got Carolina advancing instead of Arizona. In fact, I have Arizona falling to Philadelphia in the first round.
Oh, wow.
So ultimately, Pittsburgh, who won the championship that year, Super Bowl that year anyway, still wins. Nothing changes that way. It's just the Carolina is the team that gets with Jake Delhomme getting in there. So now we're looking at a situation where Dimitrov's got to get rid of Petrino. No one can believe in this guy. He can go back to Louisville. And then I'm looking at who's the available coaches during this year. Who were the guys signed? Who's the available guys? And not only that, but who's a guy who's going to come in here and coach up a quarterback? Because I think that's still what they need. And looking at the quarterbacks, the coaches that were hired that year, I think the most interesting one to help a quarterback, well, I think it's a 2004 QB coach for New England, 2005 to 2008 offensive coordinator and QB coach for New England, Josh McDaniels. I think they hired Josh McDaniels to raise up Mike Vick right here. Also, I think we start looking at drafts. This is where it you can become madness of players switching teams just based on the different records that we would have had here. I think we're looking here as Atlanta ends up with Malcolm Jenkins and Max Unger in the first two rounds here. Just looking at the positions of need and where they would have fallen in the draft. Of course, they're still going to go out there. They're still going to pick up tight end Tony Gonzalez. But I think we got Kansas City's not quite as bad. They end up picking up Crabtree in the draft. So we're just running through these drafts, running through these seasons. It starts. I think right here you have the Josh McDaniels era beginning here. I've got the Falcons in 2009 finishing with a 13-3 record. Mike Vick stays healthy. We got Mike Vick. In fact, I've got Mike Vick winning the MVP, beating out Peyton Manning, and Josh McDaniels coach of the year. But it's not enough. They're still going to run into New Orleans in the conference finals, and New Orleans is going to go on to beat Indianapolis just like it happened in real life. So far, if I'm honest, I've seen no Super Bowls change hands. The only thing I've seen is
the path is following the path.
The path's following the path. Like this is kind of what we have here. But now we start seeing more and more. We start seeing more and more changes happening as things are different. So Mike Vick winning the MVP. Eagles aren't going to trade McNabb to Washington because they don't have Vick to back him up. Instead, they hold on to their declining quarterback. So now it begins to affect the Eagles as well. Atlanta's dropping from 19 to number 30. I think we end up with Javid Best. You may remember him from a couple of years of being okay.
Yeah.
Atlanta, they went out and signed Dunter Robinson that year. I think they probably still do that same thing. And looking through the draft, I think they don't pick up anybody meaningful, looking at their needs throughout the rest of the draft there. And then they move into 2010. Still Josh McDaniels, still Mike Vick. And here's where I begin to see Mike Vick miss some games. Still a strong team. I think they're still an 11-5 team. In real life, they were 13-3 with Matt Ryan and Mike Smith. But I think they're an 11-5 team this year with some games that Mike Vick has missed. Still enough to make the Super Bowl. In fact, I got Atlanta locking down the number 1 seed in the NFC with this right here. And they end up catching Green Bay, the number 6 seed in this case. Green Bay advances through the New York Giants. And because this is the year Green Bay wins the whole thing. And this is the first time we see it differ from the path, the Super Bowl path we followed. I have Atlanta beating the number 6 seed Green Bay. I have Atlanta going on to the conference finals, beating Chicago. Meanwhile, on the other side, things have changed as well. And who's there? The New England Patriots. I know what do the New England Patriots do? They just win. I got the New England Patriots winning. I got them winning. This is a season that Green Bay should have beat Pittsburgh. Doesn't happen this time. Kansas City's in there, disrupts things with Matt Ryan, knocks off Pittsburgh, and sets up an easier path for New England. And then we're looking at moving into the next year, right? So we got some things going on. What do we got here? I got some Atlanta still trading for Julio Jones. They're going to do that. How could you not? I mean, clearly Dimitrov had a love affair with Julio Jones because he was prepared to throw a first, second, fourth, and then a first and a fourth in the following year to move up a couple of picks. So I think he does the same thing this time out to get himself some Julio Jones, which then sets up a little Roddy White Julio Jones situation with Mike Vick throwing him the ball. And we move on to the next year. And 2011, I think we're looking at a 10-6 team here. Like we're looking at a 10-6 team. And this year, we've got another scenario where things get shifted around a little bit because in this year, what should happen is the Giants should upset New England again. However, what's going to happen here is the Giants, they're going to lose to Atlanta. They're going to lose the 10-6 Atlanta Falcons here, setting up the Falcons moving on and losing to Green Bay that year. Green Bay was a powerhouse team that year. And Green Bay ends up going on to the Super Bowl and losing to New England. So I've given New England the last 2 Super Bowls here, setting
God
up a
damn it. Goat, winning more.
I know. This is the only path that happens. They start knocking off the teams. Things start shifting a little bit. You know who doesn't shift? New England. New England stays good. They always stay good. And then I've got what I got here. So then you got Cam Newton, doesn't get drafted by Carolina. He ends up going to Buffalo. Things start spinning out of control here. Andy Reid's hired by Indianapolis. Things are spinning. Philadelphia is going to join Washington in pursuing the Rams' number 2 pick. They're going to end up making the deal that Washington made to get himself some RG3. Yuck. I know. This is what happens when you don't have a quarterback. When you don't have a quarterback, you got to pay up to get a quarterback.
Yikes.
At the time, everyone thought RG3 was the man. And RG3 had a good year. RG3 did have a good year. And it's his rookie year.
I might have been excited about that. I might have at the time.
Oh, yeah, of course you would have. I mean, RG3 was exciting. It just didn't end good at all.
No.
So it continues on. We got the next year. We're looking at Baltimore, San Fran is how the Super Bowl should go. But I got the 10-6 Atlanta Falcons in 2012. Again, we're seeing some decline from Mike Vick here. This team is mostly built around their defense at this point, based on the drafts that have gone down. Atlanta is making the playoffs again, and where they got them here. I got them losing to San Fran in the first round. Life continues on. 2013, we're in full on decline here. Mike Vick's he's falling apart. Dominic Davis is the backup. I've got the right side of the line. The right guard, right tackle is kind of deteriorated. They're both young guys. They're not protecting Mike Vick because Mike Vick needs that right side protected as a left-handed quarterback. And he comes out. This team ends up going 4-12 that year, and the team realizes they need to draft a quarterback. And you know how that works out? Differently because of the draft situations where the different pieces are following different needs. I got them taking Derek Carr in the second round, setting up a future the next year where Derek Carr in 2014 takes over, takes the team to 9-7, and we begin the Derek Carr era along with, let me read you a lineup here because I got a little lineup here. I want to hit you with some of the players they've got by 2014 before I tell you Mike Vick retires. Mike Vick retires 2014, leaving the Atlanta Falcons with a bizarre Derek Carr, David Johnson, Julio Jones lineup, Geno Atkins over on defense to go along with Walter Thurman and Malcolm Jenkins. Some of the other notable differences here I got for you. I got Jacksonville putting up some numbers in that last year there with Tannehill throwing the ball to OBJ. And we got New England trotting out DeAndre Hopkins as their number 1 wide receiver. And at this point right here, I'm going to turn it over to the future with Derek Carr and David Johnson. And that's the end of the Mike Vick story, which really, I don't think Mike Vick essentially made a big difference. I think he was a really good quarterback. I think he's arguably a Hall of Famer. In fact, in this case, I'll argue he is a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he wins any Super Bowls. I don't think his presence on the Atlanta Falcons team was going to be enough to get him to win anything. I think what it does when you look at a player of his caliber falling out or being added back in, it changes the butterfly effect of everything spinning forward.
Well, hell, man, you flipped the script. You know what you did? You took the entire stack of paperwork, right? You just threw it up in the air and said, "Fuck this shit o'clock." You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's what this is. Well, you know what? I went a little deep too. I'll try to tighten mine up a little bit, but I think I also grabbed the stack and just said fucking threw it out the window. So I'm gonna get a little crazier here with you, right?
I like it. Let me hear it.
So say Michael Vick does not commit these felonies and doesn't get incarcerated. He has his 2007-2008 season, right? Well, the Bobby Petrino, right? The quitting after 13 games. I don't see that changing. I'll explain why. He had Joey Harrington, Chris Redmond, and Byron Leftwich as his quarterbacks that year, right?
Mhm.
So all of them had spot starts and they were just terrible, right? Now,
Mhm.
now Matt Schaub's gone. He leaves to go to Houston in a trade still. So Vick is starting now. So ultimately, he's going to be backed up by probably Leftwich and Redmond, we'll say. Harrington's not there, right?
Mhm.
Harrington may go somewhere else to be a backup instead of a starter. So Vick starts the Falcons off instead of 1-5 like they started with Harrington at the helm. Vick starts them off 3-2, right? But then he suffers a season-ending injury. He gets a
Oh.
torn pectoral muscle, right? Finishes off his 2007 campaign. And without Harrington being the starter with some spot starts, the Falcons go on an unprecedented losing streak the rest of the season, and they still finish 4-12. Petrino, the coward, the bitch that he is, bolts back to the NCAA. Hugh Jackson is still let go as offensive coordinator, but as we know, he ends up in Baltimore in 2008 as the QB coach under offensive coordinator Cam Cameron, who was a super hot commodity at the time, and first-time head coach John Harbaugh coming from the Eagles.
Oh no.
However, the 2007 Baltimore Ravens were abysmal themselves. Under Brian Billick, they finished dead last in their division at 5-11, and they had a bust at quarterback in Kyle Bowler. And Steve McNair was in the twilight of his career as a backup. So what's Ozzie Newsome do? Boom, he needs to make a huge splash. That chess move that comes in the form of a trade, right? And he trades the 2008 and 2009 first round picks that they have and a 2009 second round pick, along with Willis McGahee, right? Because they drafted Ray Rice in the
Are
second round
you
of
kidding me?
2008, right? And he trades them to Atlanta for Michael Vick. Michael Vick
Jesus Christ.
goes to the Baltimore Ravens under John Harbaugh, right? This gives Harbaugh the franchise QB that Baltimore's been longing for, especially for new quarterbacks coach Hugh Jackson, who's ranted and raved about his untapped throwing potential to Ozzie Newsome and Harbaugh and Cameron, because he saw Mike Vick for a few games before he got hurt, right? So now Baltimore could build an offense around Vick to match the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs led defense with then defensive coordinator Rex Ryan. And that coaching staff had Vic Fangio, it had Chuck Pagano, and it had Mike Pettin on that defense. So now we're talking. Now we're cooking with grease, right? Under Cameron and Jackson's quarterback guru tutelage, guess what? Vic would go on to boast some new impressive throwing numbers. 273 completions out of 393 attempts, 3,700 yards through the air, 890 yards on the ground. He goes 29 TDs to 9 interceptions, adds another 7 rushing touchdowns, and his completion percentage at an all-time high, 66.8 in his first season in Baltimore, right? Atlanta finishing the way they did the year before, guess what? They're still going to draft Matt Ryan with the 3rd overall pick in 2008, like they were meant to. And maybe they take Aqib Talib instead with Baltimore's 18th pick that year,
You know
as
what's
opposed
funny?
to Joe Flacco.
I had him taking Aqib Talib too.
Yeah, they go Aqib Talib, right? Joe Flacco is going to fall to the Miami Dolphins at pick 57 in the second round. And instead of Miami taking Chad Henne that year, they take Joe Flacco instead, right? Yeah, well, for both of them. Well, Flacco at least won a Super Bowl and had a decent career, but Henne was bad. And they take Flacco. Now all of a sudden Miami gets Flacco. While this is happening, though, your man Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles are stewing over a missed opportunity to trade for Vick, because it becomes apparent to them, to the organization, that McNabb's skills are dwindling. However, Reed's got to live with McNabb's heir apparent, Kevin Kolb, who was drafted in the second round of 2007, right? So the Baltimore Ravens then go on a consistent run in their division, along with the AFC in general, for the next 2 years, where Vick is at the helm of the team. Vick continues to dazzle with his legs, but he is vastly improved as a pocket quarterback. The Ravens end up finishing 13-3 in 2010 and finish one win above their AFC North rivals, the Steelers, to take the division and get a first-round bye and some home field advantage compared to the actual 12-4 finish they actually had against Pittsburgh.
Which year is this?
That was in 2010. They
Okay.
both finished 12-4, but Pitt actually won the division, and then Baltimore lost to Pittsburgh in the divisional round in the original playoff scenario. This time, right, Vick helps the Ravens overcome the Steelers at home because they're going to be at home because they win the division 13-3. He then goes on to beat the Jets in the AFC Championship because somehow the Jets got by New England that year.
Yeah, I know. For crazy shit.
Only to fall short once again in this scenario to Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl 45. Losing a close one, though, 27-24 by a last-second Mason Crosby field goal to break Vick and the Ravens' hearts, right? But Vick comes back and ends up winning the AFC North again in 2011, taking a return trip back to the AFC Championship again. However, he ends up falling short again. This time, TB12 and the Patriots take him out in a close 17-15 game. And the GOATs, Belichick and Brady, get one over on him. So
what happens to New England then? Do they go on to win the Super Bowl that year then, or they lose to the Giants like they're supposed to?
They still lose to the Giants like they're supposed to, right? So
Eli Manning had their number.
Yeah. However, Vick wins the AFC North in a hard-fought battle at 10-6 in 2012, right? But he puts on a magical playoff run, very reminiscent of Flacco in 2012. He beats the number one pick rookie sensation Andrew Luck in a wild card home game before traveling to the frozen valley of Denver to beat Hall of Famer Peyton Manning in his first year in Denver. That season they went 13-3, Denver did, but Vick puts them down. And then in a revenge matchup from the season before, Vick leads a surprising shellacking over TB12 in Foxborough, 35-14 to win the AFC Championship. This time, the Baltimore versus San Francisco matchup that takes place at Super Bowl 47 in 2012, well, it's nowhere near the close affair that it was originally. Instead, Vick turns out the lights in New Orleans with an electrifying performance. It's like reminiscent of Zeus raining thunderbolts down on the entire electrical grid of the bayou. You know what I mean? Vick puts up, listen to this, I got him going 27 for 35, 342 yards in the air, 4 touchdowns, along with 92 yards on the ground for another rushing touchdown. No INTs, and Justin Tucker tacks on another 2 scores for a 41-20 blowout victory over the Niners, who are basically forced. Yeah, they're basically forced to throw the ball because Vick is just smoking them. So they're forced to throw the ball to try to make a comeback. Doesn't happen. You know what happens though? Vick looks the young clone wannabe Kaepernick in the eyes, and he says, "Not on my time, young bull." You know, imitations need not apply, as Vick not only hoists the Lombardi Trophy that year, but he takes home the MVP trophy as well.
Wow.
After season's end in 2012, Vick goes on to sign a 4-year extension with the Ravens for $92 million and $47 million guaranteed to play out the remaining years of his career in Baltimore. He goes on to have some success with Baltimore after 2012, but ultimately injuries start to cost him his career, and he ends up retiring in 2015 as he did. He ends up with career numbers. I would say 198 touchdowns thrown to 104 interceptions. He ends up getting up to little over 33,000 yards. So he's at 33,498. He ends up getting 9,096 rushing yards from a quarterback with 52 rushing TDs. Guess what? Super Bowl champ. Then he's the NFL MVP and Super Bowl MVP in 2012. He gets 8 Pro Bowl selections, 3-time All-Pro, and he finishes up as a second ballot Hall of Famer. Only reason he's second ballot is due to early pedestrian throwing numbers compared to his contemporaries.
Man, I like it.
But this is something we didn't touch on. I'd like to try to touch on this real quickly. What's the after effect of Michael Vick not going to Philly, right? I got some thoughts on this, right? So touching on the Birds, Vick's not signing there in 2009, right? What's happening, right? The Eagles still end up moving on from D-Mac in 2012. They trade him to the Redskins as it originally happened. And Reed is pissed that he couldn't land the younger, more talented Vick in 2008 to replace McNabb 2 years prior, right, in 2008. This time, though, with the incumbent starter being Kevin Kolb at the helm, along with some spot starts from a coached-up backup Mike Kafka, the Eagles still managed to salvage the season, right? And win the division at 10-6. Cobb, returns, from his game after the injury and gets his job back this time, but he didn't get it back from Vick.
Mm-hmm.
Vick did get hurt in the season and Cobb played 2 starts, but ultimately Vick took the job back. So this time Cobb gets his job back. He ends up flourishing a little bit under the quarterback whisperer Reed, leads the Eagles to a division title, but a first round exit to Green Bay and a barn burner. They lose to Green Bay as they did in 2010, but this time it's 30-27, right? So then that 2011 dream team comes together with Vince Young, right, being brought in to back up Cobb. But now Cobb isn't traded to Arizona. Cobb's the starter, right? But he's struggling to stay on the field due to injuries. And when he's playing, he seems to have regressed a bit. Vince Young has to step in for some spot starts. The Eagles fall short of the playoffs. They go 8-8, right? So this is where it gets crazy. Reed recognizes that another change of quarterbacks absolutely necessary at this point. And with the failure and the embarrassment of the dream team comments from Vince Young, Reed makes a very bold and incredibly smart move that will set him up as the head coach of the Eagles for his entire career up until this current day by using the second pick in the second round, pick 59, to bypass the journeyman Vinny Curry. And instead, he secures his future Hall of Fame franchise quarterback, Russell Wilson, 16 picks earlier than Seattle would have taken him at pick 75 in the third round. Philly, in return, fulfills the trade of Cobb to Arizona right before the start of the 2012 season because they see Russ's ability in camp and preseason, right? So now Seattle's losing out on Russ. Instead, they pick Nick Foles in return due to Carroll's knowledge and experience with Foles in the Pac-12. Foles never ends up beating out the free agent starter Matt Flynn for the job, and he remains a career journeyman backup. Seattle never finds their franchise quarterback Russ. Carroll is out of the NFL again by 2014 and back in the college ranks, right? So meanwhile, Russ has taken the Andes Eagles to a 9-7 finish in 2012, but they missed the playoffs by a hair due to one additional loss on record. However, Russ is so promising that Laurie's intrigued, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to keep rolling with Reed at the helm. And because that year they finished 4-12 under Vick, Reed loses his job, right? And Chip Kelly comes in. Well, Reed comes back in 2013 with a vengeance, builds an offense around Russ, and shores up his defense. And Reed and Russ lead the Eagles to back-to-back Super Bowl championships in 2013 and 2014 by winning Super Bowl 48 over Manning in Denver. And then again, they beat Brady and Belichick, right? And this time, they let LaShawn McCoy run it right up the gut instead of that bonehead pass to Malcolm Butler, right? LaShawn McCoy runs it right up the gut, and they get some revenge 10 years later, a decade later, after they lost to New England. So Reed not only keeps his job with the Birds, but he wins 2 titles, right? 5 to 6 years earlier in his career than, and gets that revenge game back, that revenge Super Bowl loss, right? So now you're wondering, what happens to Chip Kelly? Well, former Eagles executive Joe Banner, along with former Eagles GM Tom Heckert, woo Kelly to Cleveland after all. Chip Kelly fails even more quickly and embarrassingly in a short 2-year tenure in Cleveland. This time, he does not go to San Francisco afterwards, and he goes right back to college like Pete Carroll. Pat Mahomes ends up drafted later in the first round in 2017, maybe by Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City still, who never ends up trading up but stays pat. They might still pick him up. Or by San Francisco with their second pick in the first round at 31. I believe Pat Mahomes, though, is so talented. And even without Reed, he would have found a way to be successful and win. Well, guess what? Pat Mahomes pairs up with Kyle Shanahan, probably representing the NFC in the Super Bowl in 2019 without a doubt. Mahomes now leads the 49ers to a Super Bowl victory in Super Bowl 54. What happens to Carson Wentz, right? Ends up getting bypassed by Cleveland twice, right? As they end up picking Joey Bosa with the second pick, and they still take Corey Coleman out of Baylor at 15, right? Wentz takes a huge tumble down the draft before finally being scooped up by Gary Kubiak in Denver at pick 26, essentially bumping that bum Paxton Lynch to the second round. Carson actually proves to be a franchise quarterback, though, in Denver as they secure weapons around him a lot sooner than Philly did. And Wade Phillips continues to improve that defense. Denver is competitive in the AFC, and without Mahomes there now, and Mahomes being in the NFC, Carson makes Denver a threat without having to rely on Trevor Siemian or Case Keenum or Joe Flacco. Flacco, it's quite simple, ends up with Miami with the 32nd pick. That's first pick of day 2 in the second round. Proves to be a decent middle of the road quarterback with some success. Never reaches the level he did in Baltimore. His career kind of mirrors Chad Pennington, and he fizzles out of the league. And after moving to a few teams within a 9-year career, Doug P.
Okay.
Nope, never a head coach in the league. Reed is still head coach with the Eagles. Banner and Heckert are out of the league in a failing Cleveland effort with Chip Kelly. Doug P. gets his 2 Super Bowls with the Birds as Russ Wilson's quarterback coach in 2013, 2014. So Doug P. ends up replacing maybe Martin Morningweg as the Eagles offensive coordinator by 2015 and is remaining in that position today. Here's where you're going to cry. Nick Foles, his story ends as a 5-year career backup with mild success in spot starts. He's out of the league by the time his Cinderella story was to come true in 2017 with the Eagles. Instead of Philly, and that historic moment in NFL Super Bowl history, Foles is running a few of his family restaurants while doing some pastor work for his local Texas church by 2017. Gone.
All right.
And when Vick retires in 2015, the Baltimore Ravens let Ryan Mallett take the helm of the team while drafting Jacoby Brissett at pick 70 in the 3rd round of the 2016 NFL draft. Brissett and Mallett keep the Ravens somewhat competitive, but Baltimore finds a way to trade back into the 1st round with Reed and the Eagles in 2018, and they still grab their franchise quarterback, Lamar Jackson, as they realize Brissett will not get them back into the hunt. So
okay, I like it. It's not often. I thought you had a good, strong argument there. It's not often I admit defeat, so I won't. So I won't.
How dare you, right?
But in your scenario, let's get right into it. What's the impact? Whose legacy's hurt? Whose legacy is elevated in this scenario?
Yeah, well, the impact, obviously, Vick doesn't commit the heinous crimes he was found guilty of. He kind of stamps his legacy in the NFL and shuffles around the dynamics of the league and creates a lot of opportunities for players and other teams and coaches. But who's most helped? Mike Vick, obviously. His legacy, in my scenario, the wins, the career numbers, and the impact on the game are all highly affected in a positive way. I think Andy Reid, the Eagles organization, and Russ Wilson.
So who takes the hit?
Ooh, well, Seattle and Pete Carroll get shit on. Carson Wentz takes a little bit of a hit because he doesn't get a ring, and I'm not sure he flourishes under Kubiak the way he would under Dougie P.
Yeah.
Doug P definitely takes a huge hit because he never helms his own team, never wins the epic Super Bowl 52 showdown. And most of all, I'd say Flacco and Foles really get shit on here in my scenario. They never win any Super Bowls. They both fizzle out. Flacco is a little bit more successful. And then there's really no change or a neutral thing going with Baltimore and Harbaugh. I mean, they're still, they find ways to win. They remain relevant. They remain successful, and they remain on course status quo, drafting and everything. Cleveland still sucks. They still draft poorly. They fire Heckert and Bannard. Chip sucks even harder and is found out to be a fraud. And New England is still successful. Even if they lose to the Eagles in 2014, guess what? Now there's no Eagles to stop them in Super Bowl 52 in 2017. So they win. So they get their 6 anyway.
Yeah. All right. So I guess I'll hop right into mine then. In my scenario, obviously I got New England getting an extra two rings. So that legacy is pretty nice. And I would say this, Mike Vick's legacy is so poor that just by removing the dog fighting scandal, his legacy, and again, in my scenario, I also had him as a borderline Hall of Famer too. So
completely agreed.
Yeah, I think he's the guy. When I look at whose legacy's hurt in this scenario, I mean, I took away Aaron Rodgers' ring, so I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers. He's a good quarterback who can't get the job done in my world here. So I think that's what I got.
That's a huge hit. Hit.
Before we get to our final thoughts, I want to send it over to you because I know you got some plugs. I know you got some shout outs.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you out there who'd like to support us, you go to patreon.com/LayerLight Studios and support not only this show, but support our game development projects and other Layer and Light podcasts, such as Game Johns and Screen Johns. As always, thank you to all our current patrons, and a special thank you to the Russell James John support group patrons. You guys are the best. Thank you. We love you. If you'd like to support just our show, you could do that by going to glow.fm/GGNP. And thank you in advance for any support and any contributions. Thank you to Luke Mullet for our awesome theme music. We'd like to thank Lantern Light Studios for allowing us to do the podcast. Without their support, this isn't the thing. We'd also like to thank our producer, Anthony Ziccola, for show news and notes and really guiding us on and off the air. Thank you. And course, our wonderful audio engineer, Maria Labanovic. Thank you. You're killing it for us. You're doing great. We love you and keeping us on the air sounding good. You could reach Alex and I pretty simple. We're going to simplify this for you. If you want to follow me and Alex, and I'm going to simplify it for you right here, you could just go to allmylinks.com/GGNP. So I'll reiterate that again, allmylinks.com/GGNP. You can find our Twitter's accounts. You can find our IG. You can find our website. You can find ways to listen to the show. And by the way, you can find anything about Lantern Light Studios and our other podcasts, such as Screen Johns and Game Johns. So it's all there, real easy, allmylinks.com/GGNP. Hit us up. Let us know what you think of our show. Let us know what we could do better or any moments that you'd like us to visit. Also, visit lanternlightstudios.com for more information about our show and the other amazing podcasts, Game Johns with Mitch, Jack, and Riley, and Screen Johns with Savannah and Maria, where they talk about movies and TV. We love those shows, dude. Highly recommend them.
So just a reminder here. I know we mentioned at the beginning of the show about the donations to the ASPCA. Make sure we get them in there. We wouldn't mind making some donations to a good cause here. So any 5-star ratings on the Apple podcast before August 10th. I did it during the warm-ups. I said March. So yeah, August 10th. Please get it in before then, and we'll make sure to make some donations to the ASPCA. Before we get out of here, though, I do want to ask you what your final thoughts on the subject are. Do you have any final thoughts or a moment, Mike Vick moment that comes to mind?
I do. You know what, though? Actually, Alex, if you wouldn't mind me doing something real quick, I kind of talked to our producer, Anthony, about it. Kind of something that's been brought up because I had a friend asking me about this, about Patreon and Glow.fm. I just want to do a quick explanation. Yeah, no, it's my fault. Like I talked to Anthony about it and I had a friend ask me like, what is Patreon and stuff like that. I'm going to try to make this simple for like all our listeners, the audience out there. Patreon, like if you would be donating to our show through the entire Lantern Light Studios family through Patreon. And in doing so, you not only be supporting our show, but you would also be contributing and supporting other projects and development under the studio's umbrella. As a patron for the show, you could choose through 5 different tiers of membership to support us and the studio. Like an example, you could do a starting one, a first tier starting at $2 on up. You would essentially have exclusive access to additional content such as bonus episodes of the show and our other podcasts. You would also have access to our poll section on our Discord server where you can vote on show content and talking points and much more. The tiers are actually further explained in detail at patreon.com/lanternlightstudios. Now, the difference between that and glow.fm/GGNP, glow.fm is actually, it's a site that's for anyone who doesn't want to sign up for a monthly membership under like Patreon is, but would like to offer a direct contribution to our podcast at any time. So sorry about that. Thank you for letting me.
No problem at all. So hit me with those final thoughts.
Final thoughts are I would have loved to see a full career out of Michael Vick. I mean, he dazzled the eyes. Every man, woman, and child, I think that like let the NFL and football and sports run through their blood knew who Michael Vick was. Every kid was out there pretending to be Michael Vick. I mean, when we played Madden, it was, I always wanted to be Michael Vick. He was the guy you tried to trade and put on your teams. It's a shame that things turned out the way they did for him in a way, but hopefully, looking at him now today, he's grown as a human being and a person, I believe, I hope, and that he's helping other people. So, my final thoughts are, again, like anybody out there, not just dog lovers, animal lovers in general. I talked about Tri-State Basset Hound Rescue, and there's other rescues out there. Like seriously, rescue a dog, foster a dog, take animals in, love animals. They deserve the love, and we need the help. And that's why we want to contribute to the ASPCA as much as possible here in a donation. So please throw those 5-star reviews at us.
Thank you, Reno. I guess when I think of Mike Vick, and you mentioned it earlier, what I really think about when I think, hey, let me just picture Mike Vick in my head, it's Madden. It's the video game cover. It's the trading for the guy to put him on your team because he's the best quarterback. He's the most skill. He changes the game in your video game. And for me, that's kind of the way I remember Mike Vick the best. Obviously I remember him as an Eagle, but again, I struggled having good feelings about the time with Mike Vick as an Eagle. Even though we had success, it was a tough time for me. And as to be a fan. It was a tough time for me to be a fan, and I'm glad he's gone. It became easier to root for a guy like Carson Wentz or Donovan McNabb, or I mean, even bad quarterbacks like Kevin Cobb.
Kevin Cobb. Oh my goodness, man! I still can't get over seeing you in a number 4 jersey. You
I mean,
probably had
don't
like
worry.
the old throwback 1961, didn't
No,
you?
don't worry. No one else ever saw it because, like I said, like there was very few opportunities to wear it.
You probably
But
clean your toilet with that jersey now, don't you?
I mean, yeah, and the whole time Mike Vick was here, I was kind of secretly rooting for Kevin Cobb to come back so I could wear that jersey again.
I could
Um,
see a lot of people having that struggle. It's a struggle for a lot. And you know what? The Eagles lost a lot of fans, and a lot of them probably for life. A lot of them
yeah,
probably didn't come back, you know, and
like I said, I
understandably
mean,
so.
I'll root for the local teams, but it definitely changed my relationship with them forever. It definitely did. But I don't want to end on negative notes, so let's talk about the video game, which I thought was, yeah, like I said, it was for me. It's a positive memory of Mike Vick I have, which was the fun times playing in the basement with a bunch of people hanging around waiting to go next, and everyone trying to pick the Atlanta Falcons or the Eagles, basically. So,
Very
um,
reminiscent of Lamar Jackson now. I see a lot of
oh
kids
yeah,
picking Lamar and picking Baltimore, you know.
yep.
Crazy times. I love the black and white and red jerseys they changed to at that time. Like it was
They were a
super
sharp looking
in.
team, and that's call it
Yeah.
was. Mike Vick was cool. Mike
Yep.
Vick was
Hey,
cool.
got to give John Gruden props for one thing, man. Starship 7.
Yep.
He really was, man. It was a crazy journey for Starship 7.
Well, thanks for doing this with me, Reno. It was a weird one, a tough one to navigate, but I think we did a okay job here. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you. You
Um,
did a great job too. And thank you, as always, for having me.
all right. Well, this has been another greatest game never played.